Hello, my name's Angela Martin and I'm the vicar at Forest Row, and I've also recently become an acting archdeacon of Horsham alongside Derek Wellsman. Well, I'm here to reflect on our Bible passage for this week, which is from St. John's Gospel, John 2, verses 13 to 22. And it's that moment when Jesus turns over the tables in the temple. Cheekily, I sometimes say to my PCC, well, of course, turning over a few tables is always an option. And of course, this passage is one of those passages that we cite as a reason for righteous justice. It almost gives the okay to lose it sometimes if it's for the right reason. And we say that because the Lord did. And we have the impression of the Lord losing his temper in the middle of verse 17, where it says, "Zeal for your house will consume me." To be consumed by a feeling is to be overwhelmed by it. And that if that feeling is anger, then it's not difficult to go one step further and to imagine that emotion spilling over into an action of destruction. And although I sometimes jokingly say to the PCC that turning over the tables is an option, I don't really believe it is. There are many passages within Scripture that we have to grapple with, a bit like Jacob when he grappled with God through the night. And maybe a bit like Jacob, sometimes what happens is we leave limping, but I hope blessed by the experience. And this is one of those texts where I feel that I need to grapple with. And the reason I have to grapple with it is it's because it's about Jesus apparently losing his temper, which is such an alien concept for the Prince of Peace, for Jesus to lose his temper and to trash the place. It's an image of someone having a tantrum. And on the whole, it's really only small children and people who haven't really learnt to control it that lose their temper and have a tantrum. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that we don't all find ourselves in this position, when we're tired and we're at the end of our tether. And I can tell you that as a mother of 3 small boys, at one stage, I've had my moments. But in those moments of tiredness and when he's been at the end of his tether, Jesus's character is to show love and compassion. In the desert, when he's tempted by the devil, he doesn't give in and he doesn't storm about going, "It's not fair." When he's faced with Pilate and actually all the accusations, he doesn't face Pilate shouting and threatening violence. He simply stays calm. And on the cross, when he's in so much pain, he forgives those around him. He shows love and compassion. And he also shows love and compassion to those who accompany him at the foot of the cross. So why does he, in this particular passage, seem to lose his temper and throw the whole place into chaos? Being destructive, as it were, and not constructive. This goes against really all my understanding of what God is about. God is love. God is creative. God brings order out of chaos. We only have to read the stories at the beginning of Genesis to see that. So why is the question that I grapple with? Why is it in this particular passage that Jesus seems to lose it? Now, critically, I have to ask myself the question if it's simply that I'm uncomfortable with the image of Jesus losing his temper, because to me, that sort of behaviour is unbecoming. And yes, that's quite true. I am uncomfortable with the thought of the image of the Lord losing his temper. And I have to also ask myself if part of that is a consequence of my upbringing and my background and some sort of embedded behaviour in me that says you should try and always be in control of in a situation. And I have to say, absolutely, the answer again is yes to that. And I do think also that it's possibly our projection of our humanity, our human behaviour onto Jesus. Because if we face a similar situation, a situation, something that makes our blood boil, or, something that's a social injustice or a situation of enormous inequality and unfairness, wouldn't we too feel the same? And wouldn't we do exactly the same thing? Wouldn't we want to shake things up? And I suppose the answer is yes, indeed, we would. And we do. We human beings especially like to use our power and our money and our authority to force change. And sadly, there are times when we have tried every possible way to find peace and to solve a particular situation, but to no avail. And the only option is to step in and to turn over a few tables. But this is always a destructive route. And we're still left with questions such as, has it worked? Or was that justified? And of course, we far more often project our own humanity onto Jesus rather than try to reflect his divinity. But I can't help comparing what Jesus does when he's under pressure, which is usually stay calm and stick to the plan, which is to witness to God's unfailing love, with this act of apparent loss of control. And I can't compare that without feeling surprised. And yet, I'm also reminded when I read this passage about the tables going over and the coins being spilled out and the cattle everywhere, that life is messy. And God is always found in the midst of the messiness of life. And we think of Jesus's life and we think, the birth of Christ was messy, as is all birth, really. But, Mary and Joseph weren't married. They were far away from home. They were poor. Things were very difficult. Throughout Jesus's life, he was found in messy situations. He's regularly in disputes with the authorities. Even his family thought that he was out of his mind at times. And he went out of his way to push the boundaries with his disciples, helping them to face different challenges and think in different ways. And then at the end with the cross, the cross was outside the city on a rubbish heap, and it all was chaotic and very messy. And Jesus brings a sense of calm to all of that. Turning over the tables is chaotic and it is messy. And you could say that maybe in this instance that it was Jesus that created the mess. But did he? The mess already existed. The people had forgotten what the temple was all about. It was there to create space, to meet with God, to pray, to give thanks, to be healed and to be refreshed. But it had become yet another vehicle to tax and deprive people through greed, a way to keep the have-nots, the poor, the sick, the crippled out, and the haves in. And Jesus simply emptied the temple of those who were not there to pray, to give thanks, to be refreshed, or to be healed by God. And by driving out the cattle and the sheep, all the herdsmen would have had to follow them. And by emptying all the coins onto the floor and turning over the tables, the people would have had to get down on their knees and clear it all up. The animals and the people had all left, and the mess would have been cleared up, and the temple restored to a place of peace and order and prayer. And Jesus did that in the most effective way. So I suppose after grappling with this text, I could draw the conclusion that sometimes you have to draw the attention to the mess, sometimes quite dramatically, for people to see what a mess there is all around them. And once that mess and chaos has been noticed, then it can be cleaned up and order restored. And I can understand that. So maybe turning over a few tables is an option after all. But gently, and definitely not very often.